Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. This week, we're looking at the future of work in a post-pandemic world and asking, is working from home here to stay, or as the head of Goldman Sachs puts it, simply an aberration? Will we ever see scenes like this again? Or for the majority, is office work a thing of the past? Plus, the gender gap. Is working from home worse for women? And we'll be finding out how to survive if you're suffering from so-called Zoom fatigue. Only 2 years ago, official European figures showed that as few as 15% of the working population had ever worked from home. And of those, only 5% did so on a regular basis. And then came coronavirus and everything changed. In 2020, 40% of European workers were working from home. And one survey has suggested that number may double again this year as productivity rises, but the need to remain socially distanced continues. But as vaccines are rolled out around the world and eventually COVID-19 starts to ebb away, the big question is how many of us will be heading back into the office? A number of big tech companies have already come out to say that many of their employees will never have to go back. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg going so far as to say he expects fully half of the company's 45,000 employees to be working from home by the end of the decade. But, and it's a big but, he also says that anyone wanting to do so may have to take a cut in pay. If they don't have to pay to travel to work, they don't, it seems, need to be paid as much. And pay may be just one of the problems if we want to keep working from home. Workplace psychologists point to issues with improving corporate culture when the workforce is decentralized. Not being able to see others working and not talking face-to-face with fellow employees could prove major psychological drawbacks for the workers of the future. And that's to say nothing of the huge impact continuing to work from home will have on the world's infrastructure. Demands on everything from roads to retail outlets, railways to residential and especially commercial property will be enormous and will force governments, planners, corporations and individuals to completely rethink the future. But with at least one social media company reporting that an extraordinary 97% of those who've been working from home over the past year saying they want to continue to do so for the time being, it's clear the rethinking has to start now. Well, joining me now from San Diego for more detail about the numbers working from home is Kate Lister, the president of Global Workplace Analytics. Kate, you say that workplace changes can benefit people, planet, and profit. So how does that work? Or is it just because you like the alliteration?
No, it just happens to work out that way. In terms of people, it saves them three of their most precious commodities: their time, their money, and their health, or sanity. Maybe not during a pandemic, but sanity. It saves, in the US, it saves about 14 days a year, the equivalent of 14 work days, time they would have otherwise spent fighting traffic. Saves them between $3,000 and $5,000. And in terms of their health, there's all kinds of evidence to suggest that people are less stressed. They have more time in their life for sleep, for family, and for other things that make them feel good.
A lot of people have said that they don't miss traffic jams or rush hours. But I wonder, what about the physical working spaces? What does working from home mean for them? How will this impact city spaces, commercial property, local economies?
Those are all good questions. Things are changing very rapidly. We don't honestly know where it's going to end. My own prediction is that about 25 to 35% of the workforce will be working from home at least one day a week in the future. And that's up from just over 5% 13, 14 months ago. So a pretty significant change there. But the workplace environment is changing too. The physical space will be more collaborative, more tuned to people's social needs. And so home is becoming that place for focus, and the office will become that place for collaboration and the cultural immersion that people need to feel like they're part of an organization. So that means the spaces are going to get actually a little bit bigger, probably. We've gone through this period of densification where smaller places that people work. Now we're going to see that expand. And we're going to see more activity-based working. So you may not have an assigned seat in your office, and you will move throughout the office during the day to places that are most suitable for what you're doing. So you might be in a conference room for 3 people, and then you might be in a coffee area, and then you might be in a private pod where you can actually concentrate. So it's going to be a very different place, but I don't think it's going to be that big a shift in the actual amount of space. We're also seeing that organizations are kind of moving to this hub and spoke model. So we might see the downtown area get a little bit smaller, but places in suburban areas grow up to accommodate the local population and to reduce the commute and to allow people to work closer from home, either from their own facilities, corporate facilities, or from co-working spaces. So pretty dramatic shift. And certainly it's not going to be easy on the downtown businesses, the coffee shops and the dry cleaners and all of those places that relied on the traffic. But I think over time it will shake out. I'm hoping that, in fact, we can use some of that downtown space for housing, economic housing, something that we sorely need, and that will bring back a whole different level of commerce. And we might see cities return to a place of art and a place of culture and the place where people go to enjoy themselves for things. When I first moved to San Diego, it was nothing to drive down to the city. It was a 20-minute drive, easy parking. Now you don't even want to begin to get on the highway anytime after 3 in the afternoon or before 9 or 10 in the morning. So, I think it'll shake out. It's certainly not going to be easy in the interim.
What you're saying is that the office atmosphere is going to change. You think it's going to be more collaborative and there's going to be more hot desking. So people are going to be walking around the office far more than they're used to, which may be good for their steps every day. But how do you ensure that companies are getting the best out of their home workers?
Well, the real question is, how do you ensure that they're getting the best of their people who are at work or who are at the office? The highest shopping time is during working hours. So it shouldn't be a question of...
well, it's perhaps easier to keep an eye on them when they're in the office, but if they're at home, how do you know they're not shopping all day?
Well, you didn't know when they were at the office, right?
Some companies do.
The idea of managing by walking around hasn't worked for a number of years. People work best when they understand their goals, when they have the tools and the technologies they need to meet those goals, and then
so that means when they're working from home, the companies will make them more goal achievable. Is that it?
Well, it should be everybody, not just the working from home. We need to be managed by results, not butts in seats. If I get my job done, if I understand what my job is and we have goals and I meet those goals, then you should not worry when, where, or how I do that.
Kate Lister, the president of Global Workplace Analytics. Thanks for joining us on The Agenda.
My pleasure.
So we've had quite a rosy picture painted there of home working by Kate Lister, but there are certainly problems that will need solving if working from home is to become the so-called new normal. I'm joined now by Dr. Heejung Chung, reader in Sociology and Social Policy at the University of Kent, and leader too of the Working from Home During COVID-19 Lockdown project. Dr. Heejung Chung, your research has concluded that the pandemic has changed the way we work forever. So how exactly has that changed?
A lot of the hesitations managers had prior to the pandemic about whether or not workers can work efficiently at home, a lot of their hesitations have disappeared largely due to the fact that despite it being the pandemic, workers have been showing huge levels of productivity and efficiency during this period working from home, where actually they were able to carry out work even better than they were doing in the office in the midst of the pandemic. It has also changed the preferences of workers as well. Many workers found that they actually really enjoy working from home. And especially because there wasn't much of a stigma around working from home during this period, they would like to work from home in the longer future as well. So we expect that there will be, possibly not for all companies and not for all workers, but for many, real shift in the way we work from home or where we work, with many being able to work from home on a much more regular basis.
David Malpass at the World Bank said, and to me rather surprisingly, people are working too hard when they're working from home. Do your findings support that?
So even before the pandemic, what we see is that despite the popular belief that working from home is someone just kind of in their pajamas all day watching daytime TV, actually, people who work from home work longer hours, they work harder as well. And there's two reasons to that. One may be because, for many of us, commuting times take up to about 1 or 2 hours, even maybe up to 3 hours a day, some of which people give back to their employers by carrying out work during that time. Another thing is that, as I said, there's still a bit of a stigma, even internalized stigma about working from home. So when you are not really doing, a lot of work from home, you feel like, ooh, am I slacking off? And it's more evident than, for example, if you were to do the same thing in the office. So for example, checking Facebook in the office, people wouldn't think much of it. But if you do it at home, it really feels like you're slacking off.
Is there also, if it suits some professions more than others, is there also a sexual divide? Does working from home suit men more than women or women more than men?
Well, prior to the pandemic, we've seen that it was men that were gaining the access to working from home more than women. And this is largely due to the fact that, again, the assumptions behind workers and their capacity to work from home, because our societies are still kind of under this male breadwinner and female caregiver ideas. Employers thought that women, when they work from home, they don't really work from home, that they'll prioritize housework and childcare. That isn't necessarily the case, but that prohibited a lot of women from being able to work from home. During the pandemic, we've actually seen that there were more women working from home than men, again, because employers didn't have much of an option but to allow certain women work from home. And to be honest, providing women or any workers with care responsibility, the capacity to control when and where they work, can be incredibly beneficial for allowing them to take part in the labor market and take part in the labor market in a much more longer hours basis. And again, to, for example, address gender equality issue. Whether the pandemic has changed the views of managers going forward is something that we'll have to see.
Well, you talk about those outside the labour market. What about the unemployed? When the pandemic is over, are they going to be able to go back to work or work from home? They're going to have to learn new tricks?
One good thing is if companies decide that working from home is going to be the norm, and this is not just for like a day a week or 2 day a week kind of a gift, but it's as the norm that where workers can work possibly even 4 or 5 days at home, it really increases the opportunities, geographic opportunities for job search for many unemployed. And you need not necessarily be fixed to a location, which provides opportunities both for workers and employers in terms of where they could search for jobs. And I think that would be a really good positive impact.
Dr. Heejung Chung, many thanks for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you for having me.
Still to come here on The Agenda, could co-working spaces be the perfect middle ground between the home and the office? We'll be speaking to one of the general managers at WeWork. Murray, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the agenda. Of course, away from concerns over productivity and corporate culture, the mental health of employees working alone at home is perhaps one of the key issues which might leave people wanting to get back to the office. Well, here with me to explain more about the future psychology of work is Yasuhiro Kotera, academic lead in counselling, psychotherapy and psychology at the University of Derby. Yasuhiro, the pandemic has caused an enormous shift in the numbers of people working from home. What psychological impact has that had, do you think?
There are many psychological impacts, and what's unique in this time of working from home is that they are forced to choose to work from home. So that includes, of course, heightened level of stress and also loneliness, and also depression and anxiety, and also substance abuse has been increasing. So those are significant impacts of this COVID working from home.
Is it possible, do you think, to separate the psychological issues of working from home from the separate but obviously linked problems many have in dealing with the outcomes of the pandemic? No shops, things like that.
Yeah, it's a very, very important question. And then I think to do that, it is possible. And to do that, you need a couple of tactics to do it well. For example, if you look at NHS, they recommend you separate working space in home to create, this is where you put your working switch on, and this is where you turn switch off. And also make routine and follow the routine through is also an important aspect as well. That we need those kind of more logistical things to enable, distinguish those two fields.
And many of us are also suffering from what is being called Zoom fatigue. Tell us more what that is and what the psychological impact of that has been.
Of course, yeah. Zoom fatigue refers to those feeling of tiredness coming from consistent online video conference meetings. And then that can be explained by lots of factors. For example, we are naturally adapted to face-to-face in-person communication, but now we are forced to use this kind of online video conferences. That's very convenient and also can help our communication, but at the same time, that limits a couple of natural aspects of person communication. For example, there's a research about this back channel signal. Means that when you are in real-time conversation, you hear the person who you're talking to say mm-hmm or yeah, or showing a facial expression, those kind of things that are very limited in Zoom or video conference meetings, and that could create our stress and more like unconscious level, the stress accumulates, that kind of thing. So that's impacts of Zoom fatigue.
And how important is it for people to have that face-to-face connection in the workplace? Mm-hmm. The water cooler moments, they used to call them.
Yeah, that's very important. And if you look at linguistic research, they say that about 1/3 of adult communication consists of this, informal chit-chat. So chit-chat is very important, and chit-chat leads to more of connection with colleagues, and also feeling safe in the workplace, which leads to pro-social workplace behaviors. But what's interesting is that this office chit-chat could hinder our cognitive concentration, which may bother workplace performance. Research at this point reports both sides are positive and negative.
All of this is very new for most companies, isn't it? Some people have been complaining they have to work harder when they're working at home. So are companies aware of this, and are they taking action or deploying strategies to help improve the work-life balance virtually?
Yeah, that's really important. That the company should be aware of the higher stress level that employees are going through now. Just being aware of it. And then some innovative companies take this as an opportunity to create trust, workplace trust, and the trust from employees to the company is really, really important to maintain a long-lasting high work performance. So, for example, companies in Netherlands, for example, that they send vegetables and fruits to their home regularly to show care for their well-being. And also another attempt I saw in Dutch companies is that they host a cooking lesson for employees to join. So they hire a chef, cooking in front of Zoom, and then colleagues can see, and the colleague can also follow what they are doing. That kind of attempt may help to foster, workplace trust.
How can the companies help employees prepare themselves, perhaps psychologically, for working from work again, as opposed to from home?
Very, very important. I think is that our brains, like familiarity. Yeah. Then so this COVID forced us to work from home, and now I think we built for familiarity with working from home, and now we're going to go back to working in our workplace, and then our brain feels like, okay, this is where we've been working before, but there are lots of new procedures that must take place. For example, washing hands or wearing masks, those kind of things. So our brains will probably get confused. Like environmentally, it feels same, but the procedures are different, which of course leads to stress in our brain. So the companies need to be aware of that. The back to the work. So now everything's normal. That's not the case. That in our psychology, there's more hidden stress doing the normal thing. So that company needs to approach this very carefully.
Yasuhiro Katira, many thanks to you for joining us here on The Agenda.
Thank you.
Of course, as well as working in an office or working from home, there is a third option, the co-working space. So how might that option fit into a new working normal? Here with me is Mathieu Proust, the General Manager for WeWork in the UK, Ireland and emerging markets. Mathieu, before the pandemic, WeWork and other co-working spaces appeared to be the future of work. Has the pandemic changed that?
That has definitely not changed anything. I think what we have seen over the last 10 years is a real trend for the flexibility. And what the flexibility means, it means a flexibility for the companies that instead of taking a very long-term lease, can take something slightly smaller, 12 months, 24 months, or even just a month. But also the flexibility is the flexibility for the employees working potentially closer to home or working like in a space that is really inspiring, is really like energizing you. So the pandemic, I think, has shown that like the office needs to have a new purpose, and it's a new purpose of collaboration and energy, and we provide that.
So will you have to change the actual geography of an office then to provide this collaboration, the new collaboration?
No, I think what's interesting with the pandemic has shown us that I think people can work to an extent from home potentially. And I think what we have seen with the companies that use our space all around the world is now there's a big discussion happening. And the discussion is a discussion between the employers and the employee, trying to define what is the new model. And for some company, the new model is going back to a main office in central London. But for some other companies, it's potentially having one office in central London, scattered with, let's say, 5 or 10 offices around that, maybe closer to
like
the outskirts.
Satellite offices, that kind of arrangement?
Exactly. We call that the hub and spoke model, and that's something that we are really seeing as a trend over the next few months.
So what kind of companies use WeWork? Is it mostly SMEs, or are there large international organizations as well?
So WeWork is a very broad portfolio, right? We are present in more than 800 locations, 38 countries around the world. And to give you an idea, like it goes from the freelance all the way to big enterprise company. More than 50% of the members using our space are enterprise companies, which are the large corporates that you are mentioning.
And how much do you take into account the actual workers, the people who are doing this and the changes they're going to have to make? What about their psychological well-being, and what about their motivation?
I think it's straight on. It's super, super important as we go into the post-pandemic to really think about the well-being of the employees. And so what we're doing is really helping our member companies to have this discussion with their staff to make sure that they find the solution that are the best for them. But I think first thing first, I think we need to come back to a safe and healthy environment, right? And I think we work as an extensive now experience into making our space COVID secure. And then from there, you can decide what kind of flexible arrangements you want, going closer to home or going into a collaboration space that is here to really like enforce and improve the well-being of your staff.
Is it also much basically all just a compromise, co-working? Because it's a mixture of working from the office and working from home. So it's nothing really new, you're just splitting it up.
I think it's extremely interesting what you're saying. It's the future, and it's a discussion that has really started with the pandemic, and I think that has accelerated the trend. We started seeing companies before the pandemic jumping into a flexible workspace because they wanted to offer that flexibility to their employee. Now, I think all the companies around the UK, around the world, are having this discussion with their employee to define what's the best model.
But what advice, Mathieu, would you have for any businesses who are considering co-working spaces as a future way of employment?
I think more than co-working spaces is flexible workspace. So I think, first of all, the pandemic has shown us that nothing is certain, right? And the future is always moving. So instead of committing yourself to a very long-term lease of 10 to 20 years, why not joining a WeWork as a flexible workspace provider? The second advice, I think, would be really have a discussion with your employees to define what is the good model for your culture. Some culture will be inclined to do remote only, some culture will do office only, but some culture will do the middle. And I think it's that discussion that you need to have with your employee, because the talent attraction is essential and the culture in your company is essential.
Mathieu Proust of WeWork, many thanks for joining us on The Agenda.
Thank you, Stephen.
The messages from European governments during the pandemic emphasising the importance of staying at home and protecting health workers and each other was highly effective. So much so that some people are still afraid to return to the bustle and hustle of city life and say they feel more comfortable and productive working from home. Others, who do want to go back to their offices, may pose a problem, as several big organisations have active plans to downsize their physical premises to save money. So, employers face a quandary as they decide whether or not to allow staff to work remotely for the foreseeable future or coax them back to help limit the wider economic damage. But men and women are overwhelmingly social animals. They enjoy the company of others, whether they be friends or colleagues. Nevertheless, there's no doubt COVID-19 has forced a radical shift in working habits, and some are here to stay. Many companies haven't as yet made plans for their workers to go back to work. Some will be worried about possible litigation and/or bad publicity if they're seen to coerce workers back. And some will understandably be confused by the myriad rules they have to observe. The shock of coronavirus has been a catalyst for much needed change for many businesses. In the coming year, we'll be finding out which new habits will stick and which have proved to be temporary. No amount of ingenuity can ever protect businesses from the crippling impact of an event such as the coronavirus pandemic. However, the survivors will realise they won't be bailed out by either their government or the goodwill of others. They will have to put the past behind them and adapt quickly to the new reality. Don't forget you can watch everything from past Agenda episodes and find additional exclusive content on our website, cgtn.com/Europe, or on our YouTube channel. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, @CGTN Europe. Coming up on a future Agenda, we'll be finding out what's really behind the ongoing row about the rollout of the COVID vaccines across Europe. That's all to come, but for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the Agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.